Oblivion has a lot of Daedric artifacts that you can obtain, with most involving completing a quest for their respective Daedric prince. In this video, we're taking a look at all of them to determine once and for all which is best, as well as which of course is worst. Arguably an even more important question here, given the need to sacrifice one of these during the main questline. So, without further ado, let's obtain some magical artifacts via morally questionable means to further empower our hero of Khajiiti. Down at the bottom, though the quest itself can't be started until level 20, the highest level for Daedric quests, the Masque of Clavicus Vial falls short in a number of places. But before heading off and just handing it over to Martin to destroy, note that in order to even get this thing, you'll have to give up an arguably even more precious item. So let's start at the beginning. Once reaching level 20, you'll want to head to the Shrine of Clavicus Vial with 500 gold to offer as tribute. Then we'll go through the very standard Daedric introduction. Clavicus will briefly speak to us before sending us to a nearby dungeon to complete a task, and in this case, retrieve a sword called Umbra, sending along the statuette of his dog, Barbas, who himself will warn us to, in no uncertain terms, return Umbra to Clavicus, claiming that to do so will inevitably bring great ruin to Vial's domain. Still, the little red and green markers direct us towards finding Umbra, whom we eventually locate in the Aelid ruins of Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel? That is, both the sword called Umbra and the person, formerly named Lenwyn, who's now taken on the same identity, living in service to this sword that hungers for souls. She warns us to leave, so of course we start attacking, and with Umbra now dead, we're free to loot the sword and a full set of uniquely named ebony armor. Though do bear in mind, the armor is statistically identical to standard ebony. The sword though, in addition to just passively capturing the soul of anything we kill, also has the highest base damage of any sword in-game. And that's about the main thing Umbra has going for it, since we can actually add Soul Trap as an enchantment to any old sword, provided we have the Soul Trap spell and skill to cast it. Alas, upon returning to Clavicus, he'll offer a trade, the sword for a heavy helm. And I gotta say, the Masque of Clavicus Vial does actually look awesome in this game, definitely better than the Skyrim design. Plus, it's got the same base stats as a Daedric helm, so one of the best on the defense fronts. Where it falls short though is its enchantments. See, this fine headgear will bolster our personality stat by 20 points. Sure, we can enchant items with this very same stat, but only up to a maximum of 10 per item. That makes this mask the most efficient way to buff personality. Except personality is not a particularly useful attribute to buff, especially at higher levels. See, it governs our disposition with characters, which can be raised very easily anyway via the disposition minigame, and it also governs haggle prices, which again can just be improved by raising disposition via the minigame. Sure, it might save you a bit of time, and if you carry it around it is worth equipping for speech-based stuff, but it also has a weight of 15, which is high for a helm, and you'll probably benefit far better from the likes of a Daedric helm enchanted to suit your build. That is, if you even wear heavy armor in the first place. It's very cool to look at on a shelf, and if a cool looking character is your priority, then maybe. But at the cost of technically the strongest sword in the game, is that really worth it? Giving it to Martin too actually technically means that we sacrificed Umbra for the main storyline by not taking that instead. Though there are other official Daedric swords with better enchantments which you may prefer to use. And we'll get to those, but first, another later game Daedric artifact now. The Hircine quest can be started from level 17 and requires us very simply to deliver a wolf or bear pelts to Hircine's shrine. However, it is understandable if you then feel reluctant to do what he asks. See, Hircine will send us to Harcane Grove, with orders to kill the unicorn living there and bring back its horn. The unicorn can potentially also become our mount, however, if we sneak up on and mount it. Not as good stats-wise as the likes of Shadowmere, and it can't be armored, but there is just something cooler about riding a unicorn, and you can't help but feel bad killing it, especially when Hircine's prize of the Saviour's hide is another mediocre gift by its stats. Again, like with the Masque of Clavicus Vial, it's a very cool looking piece of kit with a giant wolf carved out on the front, but its effect of resisting magical damage is situational at best. Sure, there are plenty of spellcasters out there, and combined with other items enchantments enchanted with the same effects, we can achieve 100% resistance to magic eventually. But again, there are very few scenarios where all the damage we're up against is magical. A big place that the Saviour's Hide wins though is actually in its very generous weights of just 3. It's not too inconvenient to carry it around and just slip it on in areas with a lot of spellcasters. Then again, if maximum protection is what you're going for, then there are other light armors out there with higher protection stats than this. The Shrouded armor from the Dark Brotherhood, for instance, weighs about the same, has better stats, and many cool enchantments of its own. We can also obtain, albeit randomly by closing Oblivion gates, a Transcendent Sigil Stone which can grant 20% magic resistance, and that can then be applied to a stronger armor for a better all-round protection. But here's the real Saviour's Hide killer. Since the Mehrune's Razor add-on comes standard in Remastered, during that quest, we can find and kill a member of the Molag Tong, whose armor set I've been using for about 20 hours now. Not only is the cuirass enchanted with the same 25% resistance to magic, it also fortifies agility and offers the same resistance to normal weapons. Just make sure to do that whole quest after level 20, as the Molag Tong armor will be less powerful if found at a lower level. And now you have the options of either keeping the unicorn alive, or else you found your Daedric Artifact sacrifice for the main questline. Unless, you really like the design and want to keep it for that reason. Available from level 10, Malakath's quest to retrieve Volendrung is kind of darkly funny. By bringing a simple sample of troll fat to Malakath's shrine, he'll immediately go off on one about how a local lord named Drad imprisoned and enslaved a band of ogres to work in the mines on his estate. Malakath, maddened at the notion that anyone but him claims to own ogres, will order us to head over there and free them. We'll maybe not tell him that we've probably already killed hundreds of these things, so heading into the mines and freeing the ogres will result in quite the turn of tables for Lord Drad.
Please, I've got to get to work. If I don't, who knows what those ogres will do to me.
And I guess now he knows how the ogres felt. And Malakath will then award us with the 60 encumbrance weighing Volendrung. You might want to free up some encumbrance points before doing this quest. Now, let me start off by saying, bladed and blunt weapons scale more or less completely separately in this game. So if you've mostly been using swords, you may be in for a rude awakening when trying to use this thing. It'll have significantly lower damage until you raise that blunt skill up. Though in the case of Volendrung, its base damage is just pretty low anyway. As an artifact originally made by the Dwemer, this thing will actually have the same base stats as a Dwarven Warhammer, which will eventually of course be far outshone by the likes of Ebony and Daedric. It's also far slower to swing than a sword and even one-handed blunt weapons like the Mace of Molag Bal, which scales with the same attributes. In fact, the only real saving grace for Volendrung is its enchantments. And not the drain health one so much, that actually just means it'll temporarily reduce enemy health by 5 on each hit for 20 seconds, and after that time is up, you'll actually see the enemy recover that additional lost health, which is especially useless on harder difficulties where things take longer. Now, Paralyze at least is more unique. We can't actually apply this enchantment manually to things in-game, and the only other weapons we can get it on are going to be randomly spawning, though we can of course use potions or just eventually the spell instead. And taking all of that into consideration really only makes Volendrung viable for earlier game, past level 10 once the quest opens. But then we also have to consider the number of charges. Volendrung only has the capacity for 16 hits before completely running out of charge, needing either soul gems or a Vala stone for more. Bear in mind that's hits, not enemies killed, and depending on the enemy, if it's a particularly tough one, you could use up all those charges on just one foe. Granted, in a 1v1, your foe won't actually be able to move at all. It has got a unique advantage there. But in standard everyday combat, 3 seconds of paralysis is not as useful as it sounds, especially in larger fights. In fact, 3 seconds is about the time you'll be waiting between hits anyway. So even if you are running a heavy tank build, you probably won't miss this one as much as the others, I wouldn't say. From level 8 onwards, bringing a bottle of fine Cyrodiilic brandy to the Shrine of Sanguine will kickstart this party of a quest. The events held at Castle Leowyn are said to be drab and wretched by Lord Sanguine's comparison. So, to liven things up a bit, we're told to simply head to the next one and cast an undisclosed spell. To get into the party is very simple. We just need to rock up in some fine clothes, and that's apparently enough to convince the guard that we're definitely meant to be there.
I don't know who you are, and I'm not all that sure about you. But you're dressed for it. Can't imagine dressing up for any other reason. Go on in.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2006 Bethesda logic. And the same thing seems to work on the lords and ladies in here as well.
I think Leowyn would be better off if we removed all the dirty Argonians such as yourself. You wouldn't have a problem with that, would you?
Well, she seems like a nice woman. I wonder if she secretly tortures people under her castle. Anyway, it seems Sanguine neglected to mention that casting this spell will remove the clothes of everybody in the room, including us. And with all of our possessions now gone, we'll have no choice but to go to jail for Lord Sanguine. And after getting out, we'll see if it was worth it with our reward, the Sanguine Rose, which similarly invites a little chaos into otherwise drab and wretched events. Casting it on any target will summon a random Daedra on them, some of whom may then go on to potentially summon their own additional lesser Daedra. I mean, it's useful sometimes, especially in a pinch, though do bear in mind that the summoned Daedra will not be friendly towards us either. It'll attack everywhere and everyone thoughtlessly, and won't actually even despawn for a short while even after the enemy we cast it on is defeated. Again, useful in a real pinch, but otherwise just fight the enemy yourself. I don't think you're actually gaining any XP by doing it this way either. Plus, I mean, if you really want to summon Daedric minions to do your work, then you can do so with far more control by just leveling Conjuration. Throw in the fact that the staff only has 10 uses in a full charge, and it's something else that'll eat through soul gems if used regularly. Overall, when it comes to Daedric staves, I'd just say this one is slightly worse than the alternatives. And you may also want to sacrifice this one to Martin for some lore reasons, as when we give this to him, he'll have something particularly interesting to say.
I never thought to see this again. I once possessed it, briefly. A lifetime ago, it seems now. To obtain it and then give it up. I honor your dedication to our cause.
Resisting the temptation of a powerful magical artifact, I've heard others played by Sean Bean failed to do the same. Straight on to another staff then, the Wabbajack is always a fun weapon. You never quite know what you're gonna get, but for that reason, it offers little in the ways of reliable combat utility. It can utterly trivialize a 1v1 by turning a tough creature into a weak one, but it can also do the exact opposite. As always with Sheogorath, the quest to obtain it is one of the craziest and most interesting there is. By bringing a lesser soul gem, head of lettuce, and a ball of yarn to his shrine, for reasons beyond our comprehension, Sheogorath will send us on the chaos-filled mission to bring about a doomsday prophecy in a settlement of superstitious Khajiits. Antics involving cheese, rats, sheep, and raining flaming dogs, which is just hilarious, if nothing else, and can even be read about later on in the papers. Though do bear in mind as well that this needs doing before or after the Shivering Isles questline, so it's definitely worth coming here early, and we can start the quest from level 2 onwards. The Wabbajack itself then, in Oblivion at least, only actually works on creatures, not humanoids, thus immediately halving the enemies it'll actually be effective against. It'll also only be able to affect one enemy at a time, so it can temporarily thin out a cluster of foes if you're lucky, or again, it can turn a 1v1 into something easier, though fair warning, it can also prolong a fight indefinitely. See, if you don't defeat the creature in its transformed state before 30 seconds, it'll transform back, having recovered full health. Again, you'd better hope for a weaker transformation, not a stronger one. And like with the Sanguine Rose, it's good to be used in a pinch or a panic, but again, can arguably horribly backfire even worse than that stuff. And with the same 10 charges as the Rose too, it probably won't carry you through even one dungeon without utterly devouring soul gems. Plus, to actually finish enemies off, you're gonna need a different weapon anyway. Realistically, the Wabbajack is a fun novelty, which quickly wears off. So sacrifice it to Martin if you want, though in fairness, given its more unique nature, it is fun to keep and mess about with sometimes. The Ring of Namira. As far as Daedric artifacts go, rings are definitely the easiest to keep hold of and switch out at your convenience. Plus, we get to wear 2. I mean, realistically that number could be 10 or higher, but I get why they capped it at 2, to stop it being too overpowered. Namira's quest is available from level 5, but can be a bit of a pain to start, especially if you've actually leveled that mostly useless skill that is personality. So make sure to start this one earlier, I'd say, where lowering personality is simple. Namira will only speak to those who are repulsive and disgusting with personality scores less than 20, and we can achieve this effect by downing multiple bottles of cheap wine. With that done, she'll send us to some nearby ruins where followers of hers literally spend their lives in darkness, misery and filth, in above and beyond servitude to their lady. Though recently, priests of Archay intruded on their ruins with prayers and torchlights. So all we gotta do is put the Archay priests' torches out, and the Forgotten Ones will do the rest.
No! Archay, protect me! Save me, Lord!
If we bear in mind that this is contextually happening in utter pitch darkness, then this is freaking terrifying for the priests of Archay. But with the Forgotten Ones once again free to live in misery and squalor, Namira will gift us with her ring. Something with not only the power to resist damage inflicted on us, but also to reflect it back on our attackers. 12% of regular damage and 10% from spells. Honestly, after wearing this thing, killing blows very often weren't coming from me, but rather from the enemy themselves, losing a little of their own health with every hit on us. This can also stack with other items to make the effects more potent. Another ring, say, or a necklace, or all the other armor slots, with things like the Ring of the Iron Fist and Amulet of Axes, which can each reflect damage by an additional 33%, much more powerful than this ring. But they're also generally not found until level 20 or even 25 plus. In fact, generally later game items can have more powerful effects than the Ring of Namira, and you'll probably want to reassess your loadout past level 20, but given the ease of completing this quest and its early accessibility, it's definitely something worth obtaining and wearing for at least a good long while. The last of the Daedric staves now. The Skull of Corruption isn't necessarily better than the other two, but it can be employed in combat most reliably. Now, Vermina's quest may be available from level 5, but the offering required, a black soul gem, is probably the most difficult of all Daedric offerings to obtain. The best thing to do is to probably proceed through the Mage's Guild questline, as you will eventually uncover a ritual by which to turn grand soul gems into black ones, though that ritual can only be performed once a week at certain locations and may require waiting around for days. With a black soul gem finally in hand though, Vermina will send us on a very visually interesting quest to retrieve her orb from a wizard named Arkvet. This will involve taking on a dungeon seemingly rife with its own doors to oblivion before finding the wizard locked in an eternal nightmare. Grab the orb, return it to Vermina, and she'll grant us her staff. The Skull of Corruption, unlike the other two, has 20 uses in a full charge, and when cast on a humanoid enemy, will summon a corrupted double to fight against them. After all, why waste time doing all the fighting ourselves when our enemies can fight their evil clones? There are still drawbacks to using this, of course. We don't gain much XP fighting this way, and whilst 20 charges may actually clear a dungeon, it still eats through soul gems like nobody's business. Mind you, if the enemy has a tendency to use summons, then their corrupted clone will do the same. And the clone, unlike Daedra from the Sanguine Rose, won't attack us, and will die the second their host does as well. Of course, we are limited here to humanoids, which is basically the opposite of what the Wabbajack can have an effect on, so actually pairing these two staffs may not be a totally terrible idea. And again, when you're in a bind, taking the heat off with a summoned corrupted double can be a lifesaver. The much better of the two Daedric blunt weapons now, the Mace of Molag Bal swings faster, does higher damage, and arguably has better enchantments than Volendrung, though it also involves being level 17 before we can start the quest, which itself is very straightforward. We simply need to corrupt a righteous and by all means good man into becoming a murderer. our murderer, by the hands of Molag Bal's cursed mace. Mellus Bertilius lives nearby to this shrine and sadly lost his wife a while ago. She's buried near his house and he'll visit her grave every day. All that we've got to do is drop the mace nearby, and then when Mellus is paying his respects, unclothed for some reason in my game, just casually punch the guy.
I have sworn not to raise a weapon in anger, but you have offended my honor in this most holy place. Prepare to die, devil!
Wow, that really didn't take much. We could just say we accidentally tripped and our fist landed in his face. In fact, it's almost like the guy was just itching for an excuse to kill, and I think Molag Bal possibly knew that. Anyway, let him kill us. Make sure to unequip the Ring of Namira, else Mellus might actually die first, and Molag Bal, in his well-known generosity, will save us from death and gift us his mace. And this thing is great for spell swords, or spell maces, I suppose, since it both absorbs enemy strength with each hit and their magicka. Basically, using this thing naturally makes us stronger and our enemy weaker, whilst also passively regenning magicka at the same time. Useful especially on spellcasters. Again, you'll need to bring up the blunt skill if you haven't already for it to have any viability in combat, but with that done, it is a decent weapon, with 44 charges before depleting. Not an amazing charge, but by no means terrible. In terms of base damage, it does actually seem to beat both Daedric and Ebony, so it's mostly a case of whether you're happy with these enchantments, or would rather go with something else more befitting to your build. And lore-wise, sacrificing the artifact of a Daedric prince evil as Molag Bal to save the world is somewhat more poetic than others. The Ring of Khajiiti serves as the jewellery of choice for any wannabe thief in Cyrodiil. Available from level 10, Meridia's quest is one of the most straightforward to complete, with the simple offering of ectoplasm, mort flesh or bone meal needed to start it. Meridia, being the ultimate hater of undead, will task us with killing some necromancers in a nearby cave. Simply do so, and we'll get the Ring of Khajiiti, because of course it's a well-known fact that all Khajiits are thieves. I hope I don't get arrested for saying that, on grounds of offending someone. Well, not a problem with this ring anyway, since the Ring of Khajiiti will buff speed by 10 points, making it good for getting away and just casual travel, and more importantly, for stealth jobs, it grants 35% chameleon. This won't make us entirely invisible, we'll still have something of an outline, but it does mean we can sneak past most people undetected, provided we don't go right up to them. It's also the most powerful chameleon effect, I believe, that we can get on a single item, and brings us over a third of the way to 100%. Now, 100% chameleon is utterly broken. We are constantly invisible, and unlike the invisibility spell, we can still pursue actions without breaking the effects. We can enchant additional items for 20% chameleon each, and there's also a transcendent sigil stone effect, which can grant an additional 30%. In theory, you can achieve 100% chameleon with just 4 items, one being this ring out of the 8 we can wear, 9 with the shield. However, like with all enchantments, you'll first need to have the chameleon spell and be able to cast it, which means hitting level 50 in illusion. Now, you can cheese this a bit by just spamming light spells until hitting that level, or just casting illusion in your general gameplay. And the spell itself can be used to bring chameleon to 100 if you're not quite there with items, though you will have to remember then to keep casting it, since you'll need to stay at 100 chameleon to remain totally undetectable. And literally, even mid-combat, you can still land those multiplier stealth attacks and utterly trivialize combat even at higher difficulties, like an invisible god. It's a totally broken way to play, and the Ring of Khajiiti is the best single item on the road to achieving it, though by itself, it also serves as a good general stealth aid. And whatever you do, do not give the magical ring that turns you invisible to the character played by Sean Bean. Last time that he tried to get his hands on one of those, well, it didn't end well. The Oghma Infinium, the Daedric book granted to us by everybody's favourite knowledge-hoarding eldritch entity, Hermaeus Mora. It's also the last of the main Daedric items you'll obtain in this game. Mora's quest won't get underway until you've collected the rest of them, which technically doesn't make it unlockable until level 20+. And whilst the Oghma Infinium is unquestionably great, Mora's quest to obtain it is something of a pain. See, some of his followers need souls. A curated selection of them Infinium with 1 soul from each of the main 10 races. In short, we'll have to go around and kill one of each of them, whilst at the same time remembering to cast Hermaeus Mora's special soul trap spell beforehand. It does have a generous 2-minute effect, but even still, finding an enemy of each race can be time consuming and generally just requires us to wait until we encounter them, all the while remembering to use the spell. Now, there are certain places where most of the races do spawn. Namira's Forgotten Ones from earlier on, for instance, encompass I think 6 of the races if you want to get this done quickly, or else just keep playing naturally until you capture them all. The Oghma Infinium is of course a one-time use major skill book, which can increase a selection of skills and attributes by 10 each, with a choice of warrior, thief, or mage-based buffs. It can be a great immediate buff to level you up a whole bunch more, though based on the game's difficulty scaling, that isn't intrinsically beneficial, save for the abilities unlocked by leveling those skills. But for those patient enough, the true power of the Oghma Infinium is its ability to level the skills chosen past 100. That's the maximum we can obtain by natural means. But if we level each skill to 100 normally first and then use the Oghma Infinium, we can take the selected skills to 110. Now, this will be more beneficial for some skills than others. If you're a mage, it doesn't matter as much. Magic doesn't improve the power of our spells, but rather just unlocks the ability to cast higher level ones. Therefore, if you're going to choose the mage path, taking those skills to 110 is much more pointless, and you're better off just using the Oghma Infinium straight away to unlock the better spells. The paths of Steel and Shadow, though, where major skills like speed and strength can level, will see tangible benefits in getting to 110. So patience there can definitely be more helpful in the long run and can make the Oghma Infinium more than just a faster way to level. But given we'll be so late into the game at that point anyway, the benefits gained might not feel as beneficial by comparison. Pretty much all enchanted weapons in Cyrodiil have a charge, and when that depletes, they'll need replenishing with either a soul gem or Vala Stone. However, if we have a good loop going of replenishing souls with soul trap, all of these items will still be destroyed on use, forcing us ever to find more. That is all but one. Azura's Star is of course the reusable soul receptacle, able to hold anything up to Grand Souls, and it's well worth making a beeline for from level 2 onwards when becoming available. Another very straightforward quest, similar to Meridia's actually. We literally just go into a cave and kill some of Azura's former followers. Heroes who, in the process of killing vampires, became vampires themselves. And as thanks for our services, we'll be given the star. Definitely not something I'd recommend giving up, as pretty much every build can benefit from enchantments or enchanted items. Spellbreaker. Whilst not necessarily being the best shield in the entire game, it's definitely up there in the top 5, say. And given it scales with us and can be obtained from level 10, it's well worth going and grabbing the moment that quest becomes available. There's not many items you can use in your offhand in Oblivion, with a shield generally being the best bet. Now, when we arrive at Peryite's Shrine, we'll find something is immediately terribly wrong. See, in attempting to summon Peryite to them, his foolish followers merely wound up trapping their souls in Oblivion. No need for an offering this time, given the urgency of the situation. We instead need to travel to a plane of Oblivion and quickly run to all of the green compass markers. Simply interacting with each of these souls will be enough to send them back to their bodies, after which we'll also have to reach a portal to get ourselves home. There's no need to fight the Daedra if you don't want to, it's mostly just a quick game of tag. And with all that done, Peryite will gift us his shield Spellbreaker as thanks. And it's actually the most valuable Daedric artifact of the bunch, in terms of septims. Again, like with other Daedric artifacts, its base protection can be beaten by the likes of Daedric, though its enchantment is actually seriously powerful, with the same ability to reflect spell damage as seen on Namira's ring, only this time at a rate of 30%, hence the name Spellbreaker. Again, it is a bit situational and best used against spellcasters, but it is funny to see necromancers and such continue to die by their own spells. Mostly Honestly though, it's good to just have this, at least until level 25, as it'll just level up with you and you won't have to worry about finding better shields. Having a shield in general is just best for parrying enemy attacks and staying protected. Though once reaching level 25, and only once doing so, you'll want to complete the quest Sins of the Father, part of the Reynold and Gilbert Germain questline in Coral, and return the Honor Blade to Leithwaverick at the end of that quest. This will obtain us the Escutcheon of Coral Shield, which in addition to higher base protection, also buffs endurance and reflects regular damage by 35%, but only if obtained after level 25. Getting it sooner means the buffs will be lower, and Spellbreaker may still be the better shield. Plus, I mean, technically it remains the better shield against spellcasters anyway, but generally I'd say we encounter more physical damage dealing enemies than spell damage ones. The first of two Daedric swords we can obtain in Oblivion. The Ebony Blade is available slightly earlier at level 15, but also comes out slightly weaker in the end. To start the quest, you'll want to head to Mephala Shrine with a fairly simple to obtain offering of Nightshade. Now, being the Daedric Prince of murders, lies, and secrets, it should come as no surprise that her quest is one of the most evil. In a nearby village, two families, one Dunmer, the Dalvalus, and one Nord, the Ulfgars, have been living in peaceful harmony for generations. Mephala, though, would prefer it if they all killed each other. So, we simply head over there, execute the heads of both families, and plant stolen relics from the other family on their body. Naturally, the only logical conclusion the rest of the family members can reach is that they were killed by the other family. I mean, how else would the Ulfgar family ring have wound up on Nivan Dalvalu's corpse if he wasn't killed by the Ulfgars, and vice versa? It's seemingly common practice in Cyrodiil to leave majorly incriminating evidence on the body of one's victim. So, with no other recourse, the remaining family members battle it out to the death, much to the amusement of Mephala, who in turn will gift us the Ebony Blade, one of the few katanas in the game and dealing some of the best base damage. Again, beaten slightly by the likes of Umbra, as mentioned way back at the start of the video, but the Ebony Blade's enchantments are actually really good, and the thing has about 45 charges, about the same as the Mace of Molag Bal, enough to clear maybe one dungeon. So firstly, it absorbs 8 points of health with every strike, a stat we can effectively add to the base damage, whilst also usefully providing a small amount of health back for us, though we can actually create a more powerful version of this effect via our own enchanting, absorbing up to 22 health over the course of a second, or a flat 25 with the power obtained from a sigil stone. So looking at that, this sword by comparison isn't amazing, but pair it with the ability to silence enemies for 10 seconds, i.e. stop spellcasters from casting spells, and you have a particularly potent weapon against mages that'll be useful for the likes of the Mages Guild questline. You can also get a more powerful, longer lasting silence enchantment, but with a blade, 10 seconds is really enough, especially considering we'll likely just keep hitting the enemy. We can also literally recreate this enchantment pair on a different blade, so there is that. These enchantments therefore aren't too unique, but given the number of charges on the Ebony Blade are so much higher than a custom one, that definitely counts for something, and it's still a very good mid-game weapon. Okay, so I debated whether or not to include this one, given it's not obtained via a conventional Daedric quest, but seeing as Oblivion Remastered includes the Mehrune's Razor add-on by default, I figured, what the hell. This is a fantastic quest, longer than the usual Daedric ones, and can be started by heading to the keep Sundercliff Watch. This will take us on a massive dungeon crawl, with Mehrune's Razor being just the prize at the end. There's also the fantastic Morag Tong armor, and several other things along the way. It makes sense, of course, not having Mehrune's Dagon give a standard Daedric quest in Oblivion, since he's, you know, the main villain, but even still, by obtaining and using his dagger, we are still technically empowering the Daedric Prince of Destruction. This dagger is well worth getting, and actually sits on par with a Daedric dagger in terms of base damage. That's even before counting the enchantments. Firstly, this thing disintegrates armor, destroying its durability, which can help us take down foes, but also necessitates then mending defending any armor more which we loot. But more importantly is the Daedric Banishing enchantment, a chance to immediately inflict instant death when used, with a tally being kept as to how many souls Lord Dagon has claimed through the immediate death in the dagger. It's got 50 charges with these enchantments, which is more than good enough, and sneak attacks with daggers can deal a huge 8 times damage in Oblivion, meaning we can potentially 1 or 2 hit many or most foes from stealth. It's one of the best pairings actually, with the 100% chameleon effects, which I discussed in the Ring of Khajiiti chapter. Overall, a particularly fantastic Daedric weapon, possibly given the unfair advantage of originally being an enticing paid DLC, though a couple important things to note with this one: it doesn't scale with the player like the rest of the Daedric artifacts, and the best variant of it will only spawn by obtaining it after level 20, so you'll want to wait until then before doing this quest. Second, it can't be given up for the main questline. A shame given how ironic that would be, but again, that'll be down to its original DLC nature. I'd imagine getting Sean Bean back to voice additional lines for it would have been difficult or very expensive. The Ebony Blade is a good sword, don't get me wrong, but Goldbrand is just better. That's probably why it's not obtainable until level 20. After that, just bring a Daedra heart to the Shrine of Boethia, something very easy to obtain near any Oblivion gate, and we'll be whisked away to the Tournament of 10 Bloods, a contest wherein we systematically battle against champions of the 9 other races, each of whom has some very impressive loot to pick up in their own right. And you'll definitely want to empty your pockets as much as possible and fortify encumbrance before coming here, and maybe bring along some skooma. Weird suggestion, I know, because this stuff is terrible lore-wise, but it also temporarily buffs our encumbrance enough to fast travel back home with what would otherwise be well beyond our carrying capacity. So there's many prizes to be looted from this tournament, but none as impressive, I think, than the main prize of Goldbrand. Another katana, this time with higher base damage than even a Daedric longsword, which will deal an additional 22 points of fire damage on each hit as well. Granted, we can get fire damage enchantments higher than that via the use of enchanting or sigil stones, but the number isn't actually Goldbrand's main strength either. See, most enchanted weapons utterly blitz through soul gems, needing constant charging to maintain the magical effects. Goldbrand, though, has 77 total charges, one of the highest capacity weapons in the entire game, and far more equipped to deal with entire dungeons than most others. Plus, I mean, it looks awesome. Beaten only, I think, by Umbra in base damage, and sporting a far more useful combat enchantment than Umbra's. Sure, it's situational, depending specifically on build, and hey, maybe you don't even use blades. But when we look at how Goldbrand stacks against other blades, compared to how, say, the Mace of Molag Bal stacks against other blunt weapons, there's no denying that Goldbrand is a more powerful weapon of its class. And again, not having to recharge it quite as often is a major plus. But now, the absolute best Daedric artifact in Oblivion, one with the power to utterly trivialize lockpicking for the rest of your playthrough, is Nocturnal's Skeleton Key. Obtainable from level 5 onwards, insanely. Simply head to Nocturnal's shrine north of Leowyn, and you won't even need an offering here. Instead, you'll simply be tasked with recovering her stolen eye, which was taken by a couple of Argonians. Finding them in Leowyn and eavesdropping, we'll learn that they stashed the eye in a nearby cave, and then it's just a simple case of finding and returning it. And just like that, the lockpicking challenge becomes a thing of the past. Security will be permanently fortified by 40, and you can now just hit each pin perfectly on each try, or else just spam auto attempt. Gone are the days of wanting to get through certain doors or into certain chests, having inconveniently run out of lockpicks. Now, the regular lockpicking challenge, whilst fun and better than Skyrim's, actually, in my opinion, can still be time-consuming and frustrating. Perhaps boring, even after a while. Just waiting patiently for each pin to go up slowly and hoping that you don't accidentally hit it on a fast move. In essence, the Skeleton Key opens up more opportunities, more doors, if you will, for the rest of your playthrough, though you may actually want to unequip it after hitting 100 security. Since the key buffed that stat by a whole 40, you'll only have technically leveled it to 60 and be missing out on another 40 levels of security, which will be preventing you slightly from max leveling. Still, for early, mid, or even late game, the Skeleton Key is one of the most overpowered items, and something you absolutely want to get and hold on to as soon as possible. But overall, whilst the Daedric Artifacts are generally very powerful game items, most are actually eventually beaten by something better. And if I were you, I'd actually aim to complete most of these quests earlier on in your playthrough to get the best use of these items at a time when they're most beneficial. But let me know in the comments which is your favourite Daedric artifact and why, and more importantly, which are you sacrificing to Martin for the main questline. Personally, after finding the Molag Tong armor, I see no reason to keep the Saviour's hide, but I do feel bad now about killing the unicorn for that. But anyway, I've got tons more Oblivion content on the way, so make sure to subscribe for that. Huge thank you as always to the patrons for going the extra mile to support the channel. I'm Sam Bram, and goodbye.